Mackinac Island is an island and resort area, covering 3.8 square miles in land area, in the U.S. state of Michigan. It is located in Lake Huron, at the eastern end of the Straits of Mackinac, between the state's Upper and Lower Peninsulas. The island was home to a Native American settlement before European exploration began in the 17th century. It served a strategic position amidst the commerce of the Great Lakes fur trade. This led to the establishment of Fort Mackinac on the island by the British during the American Revolutionary War. It was the site of two battles during the War of 1812. In the late 19th century, Mackinac Island became a popular tourist attraction and summer colony. Much of the island has undergone extensive historical preservation and restoration. As a result, the entire island is listed as a National Historic Landmark. It is well known for its numerous cultural events. Its wide variety of architectural styles, including the famous Victorian Grand Hotel. Its fudge. And its ban on almost all motor vehicles. More than 80% of the island is preserved as Mackinac Island State Park. Description: Mackinac Island is about 8 miles in circumference and 3.8 square miles in total area. The highest point of the island is the historic Fort Holmes, which is 320 feet above lake level and 890 feet above sea level. According to the 2010 census, the island has a year-round population of 492. The population grows considerably during the summer as hotels, restaurants, bars and retail shops, open only during the summer season, hire short-term employees to accommodate as many as 15,000 visitors per day. The island can be reached by private boat, by ferry, by small aircraft, and in the winter, by snowmobile over an ice road. The airport has a 3,500-foot paved runway, and charter air service from the mainland is available. In the summer tourist season, ferry service is available from Arnold Transit Company, Schplers Ferry, and Starline Ferry to shuttle visitors to the island from St. Ignace and Mackinac City. Motorized vehicles have been prohibited on the island since 1898, with the exception of snowmobiles during winter, emergency vehicles, and service vehicles. Travel on the island is either by foot, bicycle, or horse-drawn carriage. Roller skates and rollerblades are also allowed, except in the downtown area. Bicycles, roller skates, rollerblades, carriages, and saddle horses are available for rent. An 8-mile road follows the island's perimeter, and numerous roads, trails and paths cover the interior. The road encircling the island and closely hugging the shoreline is M185, the United States' only state highway without motorized vehicles. The island is the location of Mackinac Island State Park, which covers approximately 80% of the island and includes Fort Mackinac as well as portions of the island's historic downtown and harbor. No camping is allowed on the island, but numerous hotels and bed and breakfasts are available. The downtown streets are lined with many retail stores, candy shops, and restaurants. A popular item at the candy shops is the locally produced and nationally known Mackinac Island fudge, leading to tourists sometimes being referred to as fudges. Many shops sell a variety of fudge, and some of the confectioners have been operating for more than a century. The popularity of the fudge has led to the sales and marketing of Mackinac Island fudge not only throughout Michigan but outside the state as well. History. Archaeologists have excavated prehistoric fishing camps on Mackinac Island and in the surrounding areas. Fishhooks, pottery, and other artifacts establish a Native American presence at least 700 years before European exploration, around AD 900. The island is a sacred place in the tradition of some of its earliest known inhabitants, the ʻmækɨnɔː tribes, who consider it to be home to the ʻmækɨnɔː, or the Great Spirit. According to legend, Mackinac Island was created by the Great Heir, Machaba, and was the first land to appear after the recession of the Great Flood. The island was a gathering place for the local tribes where their offerings were made to ʻmækɨnɔː and was where tribal chiefs were buried. The first European likely to have seen Mackinac Island is Jean Nicolet, a French-Canadian coureur de bois, during his 1634 explorations. the Jesuit priest Claude Daubin founded a mission for the Native Americans on Mackinac Island in 1670, and stayed over the winter of 1670–71. Daubin's fall 1671 successor, the missionary and explorer Jacques Marquette, moved the mission to St. Ignace soon after his arrival. With the mission as a focus, the Straits of Mackinac quickly became an important French fur trading location. The British took control of the Straits of Mackinac after the French and Indian War, and Major Patrick Sinclair chose the bluffs of the island for Fort Mackinac in 1780. The Jesuit Relations contains a long description of Mackinac Island, its fisheries, its phenomena of wind and tide, and the tribes who, now and in the past, have made it their abode. A favorite resort for all the Algonquin tribes, many are returning to it since the peace with the Iroquois. On this account, the Jesuits have begun a new mission, opposite Mackinac, called St. Ignace. Thither have fled the Hurons, driven from Chequamegon Bay by fear of the Sioux, a Iroquois of the West. The relations also indicate the tremendous importance of ʻmækɨnɔː Mackinac Island as the central point for all travel on the upper Great Lakes, and for a vast extent of wilderness and half-settled country beyond to First Nations and Europeans. The tribes who had inhabited Mackinac Island had been driven away by the Iroquois, leaving the island practically deserted until 1670. Then Hurons from Lake Superior, in fear of the Sioux, retreated to the shore north of Mackinac Island. Here Marquette continued his missionary labors with them, at the site of the present St. Ignace. Denonville unregistered trademark S. Memoir of 1688 claimed that the French had inhabited the area since 1648. A small French garrison was sent there sometime between 1679 and 1683. The name of ʻmækɨnɔː was applied generally to the entire vicinity, as well as specifically to the post at St. Ignacio, and, later, to the fort and mission established on the south side of the Strait of Mackinac. Although the British built Fort Mackinac to protect their settlement from attack by French Canadians and native tribes, the fort was never attacked during the American Revolutionary War, and the entire Straits area was officially acquired by the United States through the Treaty of Paris in 1783. However, much of the British forces did not leave the Great Lakes area until after Jay's Treaty established U.S. sovereignty over the Northwest Territory in 1794. During the War of 1812, the British captured the fort in the first battle of the conflict because the Americans had not yet heard that war had been declared. The victorious British attempted to protect their prize by building Fort George on the high ground behind Fort Mackinac. In 1814, the Americans and British fought a second battle on the north side of the island. The American second-in-command, Major Andrew Hunter Holmes, was killed and the Americans failed to recapture the island. Despite this outcome, the Treaty of Ghent forced the British to return the island and surrounding mainland to the U.S. in 1815. The United States reoccupied Fort Mackinac, and renamed Fort George Fort Holmes, after Major Holmes. Fort Mackinac remained under the control of the United States government until 1895 and provided volunteers to defend the Union during the American Civil War. The fort even served as a prison for 3 Confederate sympathizers. John Jacob Astor's American Fur Company was centered on Mackinac Island after the War of 1812 and exported beaver pelts for 30 years. By the middle of the 19th century, commercial fishing for whitefish and lake trout began to replace the fur trade as the island's primary industry. As sport fishing became more popular in the 1880s, hotels and restaurants accommodated tourists coming by train or lake boat from Detroit. Following the Civil War, the island became a popular tourist destination for residents of cities on the Great Lakes. Much of the federal land on Mackinac Island was designated as the Second National Park, Mackinac National Park, in 1875, just 3 years after Yellowstone was designated as the first national park. To accommodate an influx of tourists in the 1880s, the boat and railroad companies built hotels, including the Grand Hotel. Souvenir shops began to spring up as a way for island residents to profit from the tourists. Many wealthy industrialists built summer cottages along the island's bluffs for extended stays. When the federal government left the island in 1895, all of the federal land, including Fort Mackinac, was given to the state of Michigan and became Michigan's first state park. The Mackinac Island State Park Commission appointed to oversee the island has limited private development in the park and requires leaseholders to maintain the island's distinctive Victorian architecture. Motor vehicles were restricted at the end of the 19th century because of concerns for the health and safety of the island's residents and horses after local carriage drivers complained that automobiles startled their horses. This ban continues to the present with exceptions only for emergency and construction vehicles. Etymology: like many historic places in the Great Lakes region, Mackinac Island's name derives from a Native American language. Native Americans in the Straits of Mackinac region likened the shape of the island to that of a turtle. Therefore, they named it ʻmækɨnɔː, meaning big turtle. The French used a version of the original pronunciation, ʻmækɨnɔː. However, the English shortened it to the present name, Mackinac. ʻmækɨnɔः is also spelled as ʻmækɨnɔː, mcshc more euro kc nung, ʻmækɨnɔː, Mackinac, Teodondoragi. The Mnemoni traditionally lived in a large territory of 10 million acres extending from Wisconsin to the Upper Peninsula of Michigan. Historic references include one by Father Frederick Baraga, a missionary priest in Michigan, who in his 1878 dictionary wrote, ʻmækɨnɔː. Pl. Ga. This name is given to some strange Indians, who are roaming through the woods, and who are sometimes heard shooting, but never seen. And from this word, the name of the village of Mackinac, or ʻmækɨnɔː, is derived. ʻmækɨnɔː is the Mnemoni word for turtle. In his 1952 The Indian Tribes of North America, John Reed Swanton recorded under the Wisconsin section, Mnemoni, a band named ʻmækɨnɔː currency ʻmækɨnɔː ʻmækɨnɔː people, near the old fort at Mackinac, Mich. In an early written history of Mackinac Island by an official interpreter for the U.S. government and an Ottawa chief's son, Andrew Blackbird describes how a small independent tribe called ʻmækɨnɔː, that occupied Mackinac Island, had become confederated with the Ottawa from Ottawa Island situated north of Lake Huron. One winter the ʻmækɨnɔː on Mackinac Island were almost entirely annihilated by the Senecas of New York, of the Iroquois nation. Only two escaped by hiding in one of the natural caves at the island. To commemorate this Confederate tribe, the Ottawas and Chippewas named what is now Mackinac Island, ʻmækɨnɔː. In 1895 Fort Mackinac's John A. Bailey, M.D. published his history entitled Mackinac formerly ʻmækɨnɔː, describing some of the first recorded presence on Mackinac of French traders with a large party of Huron and Ottawas heading to Three Rivers in 1654. And an adventurer making a canoe voyage in 1665. Geography: Mackinac Island was formed as the glaciers of the last ice age began to melt around 13,000 BC. The bedrock strata that underlie the island are much older, dating to late Silurian and early Devonian time, about 400 to 420 million years ago. Subsurface deposits of halite dissolved, allowing the collapse of overlying limestones. These once broken but now solidified rocks comprise the Mackinac Brooksea. The melting glaciers formed the Great Lakes, and the receding lake waters eroded the limestone bedrock, forming the island's steep cliffs and rock formations. At least three previous lake levels are known, two of them higher than the present shore. Algonquin level lakeshores date to about 13,000 years ago, and the Nipissing level shorelines formed 4,000 to 6,000 years ago. During an intermediate period of low water between these two high water stages, the Straits of Mackinac shrank to a narrow gorge which discharged its water over Mackinac Falls, located just east of the island, into Lake Huron. As the Great Lakes assumed their present levels, the waterfall was inundated and Mackinac Island took on its current size. The steep cliffs were one of the primary reasons for the British Army's choice of the island for a fortification. Their decision differed from that of the French Army, which had built Fort Mackinac about 1715 near present-day Mackinac City. The limestone formations are still part of the island's appeal. However, tourists are attracted by the natural beauty rather than the strategic value. One of the most popular geologic formations is Arch Rock, a natural limestone arch, 146 feet above the ground. Other popular geologic formations include Devil's Kitchen, Skull Cave, and Sugar Loaf. Nature. Mackinac Island contains a wide variety of terrain, including fields, marshes, bogs, coastline, boreal forest, and limestone formations. The environment is legally preserved on the island by the State Historic Park designation. About half of the shoreline and adjacent waters off Mackinac Island, including the harbour and the southern and western shore from Mission Point to Point aux Pins, is protected as part of the Straits of Mackinac Shipwreck Preserve, a state marine park. As it is separated from the mainland by 3 miles of water, few large mammals inhabit the island, except those that traverse the ice during the winter months. Rabbits, fox, raccoons, otters, mink, gray and red squirrels, and chipmunks are all common, as is the occasional beaver and coyote. Bats are the most abundant migratory mammals, as crossing the water is no obstacle for them. There are many limestone caves serving as homes for the bats and many insects on the island for the bat to prey on. The island is frequented by migratory birds on their trips between their summer and winter habitats. Eagles and hawks are abundant in April and May, while smaller birds such as yellow warblers, American redstart, and indigo bunting are more common in early summer. Near the shoreline, gulls, herons, geese, and loons are common. Owls, including snowy owls and great gray owls, come to the island from the Arctic to hunt in the warmer climate. Other birds, such as chickadees, cardinals, blue jays, and woodpeckers, live on the island year-round. Toads have also been found. Mackinac Island contains over 600 species of vascular plants. Flowering plants and wildflowers are abundant, including trillium, lady slippers, forget-me-nots, violets, trout lily, spring beauty, hepatica, buttercups, and hawkweeds in the forests, and orchids, fringed gentian, butter and eggs, and jack in the pulpit along the shoreline. The island's forests are home to many varieties of trees, such as maple, birch, elm, cedar, pine, and spruce. Culture. Mackinac Island is home to many cultural events, including an annual show of American art from the Masco collection of 19th-century works at the Grand Hotel. There are at least 5 art galleries on the island. Mackinac Island has been the setting of 2 feature films, This Time for Keeps in 1946 and Somewhere in Time, filmed at the Grand Hotel, and various other locations on the island in 1979. Mackinac Island has been written about and visited by many influential writers, including Alexis de Tocqueville, Margaret Fuller, Henry David Thoreau, Edward Everett Hale, Mark Twain, Bill Bryson, Herman Melville, and Constance Fenimore Wilson. Favorable growing conditions have allowed lilacs to thrive on the island. Since 1949, the island's residents have been celebrating the lilacs with an annual 10-day festival, culminating in a horse-drawn parade that has been recognized as a local legacy event by the Library of Congress. Most of the buildings on Mackinac Island are built of wood, a few are of stone, and most have clapboard siding. The architectural styles on the island span 300 years, from the earliest Native American structures to the styles of the 19th century. The earliest structures were built by the Anishinaabe, Ojibwa, and Chippewa tribes before European exploration. At least 2 buildings still exist from the original French settlement in the late 18th century, making Mackinac Island the only example of Northern French rustic architecture in the United States, and one of few survivors in North America. Mackinac Island also contains examples of Federalist, Colonial, and Greek Revival styles. Much of the island, however, is built in the style of the Victorian era, which includes Gothic Revival, Stick style, Italianate, Second Empire, Richardson Romanesque and Queen Anne styles. The most recent styles used on the island date from the late 19th century to the 1930s and include the Colonial and Tudor Revival styles. The island's newspaper is the Mackinac Island Town Crier, owned and operated by Wesley H. Morris Sr. and his family since 1957 as training for journalism students. It is published weekly from May through September and bi-monthly during the rest of the year. Mackinac Island Scout Service Camp. Every summer, Mackinac Island accommodates up to 54 Michigan Boy Scouts and Girl Scouts and their leaders over alternate weeks. These scouts serve the state park as the Mackinac Island Governor's Honor Guard. The program began in 1929, when the State Park Commission invited 8 Eagle Scouts, including young Gerald Ford, to serve as honor guards for the Michigan governor. In 1974, the program was expanded to include Girl Scouts. The program is popular, selective, and a long-standing tradition. Scouts raise and lower 26 flags on the island, serve as guides, and complete volunteer service projects during their stay. These scouts live in the scout barracks behind Fort Mackinac. Sailing: Mackinac Island is the destination for 2 sailing races. The island is a sailing club, the Mackinac Island Yacht Club, and serves as the finish line for both the Port Huron to Mackinac race and the Chicago to Mackinac race. The races run a week apart, in July. They are both among the longest freshwater sailing races in the world and attract over 500 boats and 3,500 sailors combined. Both races are historical events, having been run every year since the 1920s. Film and television: the swimming pool at the Grand Hotel is named for Esther Williams, who starred in the 1947 film This Time for Keeps. The majority of the 1980 film Somewhere in Time was filmed at Mission Point on Mackinac Island. Several landmarks are visible in the film, including the Grand Hotel and the lighthouse on nearby Round Island. The film's director said he needed to find a place that looked like it hadn't changed in 80 years. A film was given an exception to the no motor vehicle law for Christopher Reeve to drive a car up to the Grand Hotel in the beginning of the film. Mackinac Island appeared on 2 episodes of Dirty Jobs, with host Mike Rowe as a Mackinac Bridge maintenance worker, and a horse manure and garbage removal composting collector. The island's Mission Point Resort was featured on the sci-fi cable television series Ghost Hunters in the 6th episode of Season 7, originally airing on March 30, 2011. Named Frozen in Fear, the episode wrapped up filming on the last available day of ferry transportation to the island due to the encroaching winter ice. Sites of interest: all of Mackinac Island was listed as a National Historic Landmark in October 1960. In addition, because of the island's long history and preservation efforts starting in the 1890s, 8 separate locations on the island, and a 9th site on adjacent Round Island, are listed in the United States National Register of Historic Places. The entire island, Haldimand Bay, and a small shipwreck form a historic district. Fort Mackinac was built in 1780 and was closed as a fort in 1895 as it no longer had any strategic purpose. It has been restored to its late 19th century state through efforts beginning in the 1930s. The Biddle House, one of the oldest structures on Mackinac Island, was built about 1780 and is interpreted in its role as a prosperous family home during the height of the fur trade in the 1820s. The McAlpin House, a working-class home possibly constructed prior to 1780, is interpreted as a frontier working-class home. The Agency House of the American Fur Company was built in 1820 as the home for the company's Mackinac Island agent, Robert Stewart. It is now open to the public as a fur trade museum. The Mission House was built on Mission Point in 1825 by Presbyterian missionary William Montague Ferry as a boarding school for Native American children. It became a hotel in 1849 and a rooming house in 1939. It is restored and now houses state park employees. The 180-ft tall glassed-in Mission Point Historical Museum has 5 floors of historical exhibits and spectacular views of the Mackinac Straits. Exhibits include the maritime history of Mackinac Island, Great Lakes lighthouses, shipping, and shipwrecks, Mackinac Bridge construction, and the film Somewhere in Time, which was primarily filmed on Mission Point property. The Mission Church was built in 1829 and is the oldest surviving church building in Michigan. Restoration efforts have returned the church to its 1830s appearance. The Indian Dormitory was constructed under direction of U.S. Indian agent Henry Rose Schoolcraft after the signing of the 1836 Treaty of Washington, as a school and a place for Native Americans visiting the island to stay when receiving yearly allotments. The building was restored in 1966 and converted to a museum, which was closed in 2003. On July 2, 2010, the building reopened as the Richard and Jane Manoogian Mackinac Art Museum. It showcases Mackinac art from prehistory to the present, and includes a kids' art studio. The Matthew Geary House was built in 1846, was added to the register in 1971, and is now available for vacation rentals. The current St. Anne Church was built starting in 1874. It replaced earlier parish churches in use on Mackinac Island and the adjacent mainland. The parish register lists sacraments performed starting in 1695. The Grand Hotel is a Victorian-style structure that opened in 1887. The 1980 film Somewhere in Time was shot on location at the hotel. The Round Island Lighthouse is located just south of the island on the small, uninhabited Round Island. The light was built in 1894 and automated in 1924. Extensive restoration efforts began in the 1970s and the exterior and structure have since been repaired. A Washcamo Golf Club was laid out in 1898 as a Scottish links type course and is now the oldest continuously played golf course in Michigan. The Michigan Governor's Summer Residence was built overlooking the harbor in 1902 and was purchased by the state for use as a governor's residence in 1943. Anne's Tablet is an Art Nouveau sculptural installation added to a bluff top overlook in 1916. Notable people: John Pennant, merchant, member of the Wisconsin Territorial Legislature. William Beaumont, a surgeon in the U.S. Army who became known as the father of gastric physiology following his research on human digestion. Michael Cudahy, meatpacking CEO and land developer. Hercules L. Desmond, fur trader and real estate financier, son of Michael Desmond. Michael Desmond, fur trader and sawmill owner. Frank Dufner, Native American golf professional. Thomas W. Ferry, member of the United States House of Representatives from Michigan in 1865–1871, and of the United States Senate from Michigan in 1871–1883, was born on the island. William Montague Ferry, Presbyterian minister and missionary, established a mission on the island. William Montague Ferry, Jr., Michigan and Utah politician, was born on the island. Jane Briggs Hart, aviator and wife of Senator Philip Hart, member of the U.S. Senate from Michigan in 1959–1976. Buried at St. Anne's Catholic Cemetery. Gurdon Salton Stall Hubbard, fur trader and pioneered Chicago CEO. Madeline Laframboise, fur trader and businesswoman, inducted in 1984 into the Michigan Women's Hall of Fame. Jacques Marquette, Jesuit priest and missionary. Henry Rose Schoolcraft, noted ethnographer and U.S. Indian agent, named many counties and places in Michigan in his official capacity. Husband of Jane Johnston Schoolcraft. Jane Johnston Schoolcraft, Native American ethnographer, folklorist and poet. Inducted in 2008 into the Michigan Women's Hall of Fame. Alexis St. Martin, French fur trapper, and patient for William Beaumont's research. G. Menon Williams, Governor of Michigan in 1949–1961. In fact, the state owns a residence on the island for the current governor's use. Some governors use it extensively, while others have used it only for special occasions. See also: Populated islands of the Great Lakes. References. External links: M185 route listing at Michigan Highways, Michigan History, Arts, and Libraries, Mackinac Island Guide and photographs.